Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight. This is a webinar where we talk about Lyme disease. No 2 weeks are the same because you create them with your questions, and so I'm interested to see what you have in store for me tonight. I just did a quick survey of some of the questions that have been posted already, and I see some that are asking questions about the recent ILADS conference that I was at last weekend. So I'll be glad to share some of the insights that I learned there. I'm still reviewing my notes and trying to figure out how I'm going to put some of the ideas together. But I'll be glad to share with you what I've been able to figure out at this point. So for those of you that are returning, welcome back. And I'm glad to see that you still return because you're getting some value out of this. And for those of you that are new, I'm glad to see some new names here. I can tell by the people that have signed up on my message board here. The way that you participate is you can listen in. I mean, you can hear the kind of things that I talk about and I explain based on questions, or you can actually ask a question. And the way you ask your question is over here on the right-hand side of the screen down at the bottom is a chat box. And you can write your question to me there. The only thing I ask is that as you're writing your question, do not hit the enter key until the whole question is complete. If you try to hit the enter key to create different paragraphs in your question, it sends me multiple questions and it gets very hard for me to follow from this side of the webinar platform. During the webinar tonight, I will read the questions as we're going through them, but I'm also going to post them. So if you happen to be participating in the live version of the webinar, you'll be able to read the questions on your screen. If you are participating, though, in a recorded version, like tomorrow or in the days after, you won't see those questions posted. They don't show up. So that's why I wind up reading now. Okay. So I'm sorry if that seems to be a little duplication of effort here, but I want to make sure that the people listening to the recorded version can see what's going on. So about the recording, I am recording the webinar tonight. And if everything goes as planned and there's no technical problems with that recording, I'll have an edited version ready for you to look at tomorrow morning. I usually try to send out an email to everyone somewhere around 8:30 to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, announcing that that is ready. Okay. Now, there's a few places you can find it. So if you happen to miss my email, I always post it on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/treatlyme. I also have been starting to put it on my Twitter, which would be I think it's Treat Lyme also, or no, it's at Treat Lyme is my Twitter account. And then, yeah, I think that's right. I should have double checked that to begin with. The other places you could find it is you'll find it on the front page of my supplement store, Marty Ross MD Supplements, which is at treatlyme.com. And then you can find it on my YouTube channel. And then you can finally find it also at my Lyme disease information site, which is treatlyme.net. You can find it at the bottom of the homepage, or you can find a bigger version of it actually on the webinars page. Okay, so there's multiple places to find it. All right. So I don't think there's any other business stuff I need to do here. I just want to do a quick adjustment of my computer camera. Hold on here just a minute. There, it's going to work out a little bit better. And let's go ahead and get started here. Let's see, there's a few people that started to type and didn't go through with their full questions. So just bear with me, and I got to get rid of those before I can get to the other ones. All right. All right. First question that I'm going to post is from Nancy. Hi, Nancy. Let's see. What updates do you have from ILAD's conference about the use of Antabuse? Is it expensive for an uninsured patient? What side effects? So first of all, I don't know the cost. I didn't pay attention to the cost, so I apologize for that. But one way you could find out the cost for Antabuse would be to go online. There's a program or a company called GoodRx, and you can go to goodrx.com and you can type in Antabuse, and then they're going to give you pricing information. You can actually find out what the price is of that drug at pharmacies near you. Keep in mind that it comes in various strengths, and so people that have Lyme are starting at much lower doses than the dose we would normally use for Antabuse when we treat people with alcohol problems. Okay, I believe it comes as 125 and a 250 milligram pill, if I'm correct. I'll soon find out for sure because I'm going to start using it when I reopen my clinical practice here in Seattle in about a month. But yes, in about a month, I'm going to be reopening that. But anyhow, when you use it in Lyme, a good starting dose that many people have settled on is 62.5 milligrams, which is half of the 125 milligram pill, beginning about every 3 days, okay? And then you gradually increase it until you try to work up to that 125 or 250 milligram pill a day. So everyone, what is Antabuse? Many people may know about Antabuse. It is a drug that we traditionally have used for people with alcoholism. And it's been used to help treat alcoholics to keep them from drinking because what it does is it builds up in the system and it blocks an enzyme that helps remove alcohol from our system. And so with that enzyme blocked, people develop toxic side effects from alcohol quickly and they can't drink. Okay, it makes them really sick. There was some laboratory experiments a while back that showed that it might be a drug that could help treat a form of Lyme called persister Lyme. So what a persister form of Lyme is a form of Lyme that when it's been exposed to antibiotics for a long time, basically goes into hibernation. It slows its metabolism way down to the point that it just ignores the antibiotics, okay? It doesn't mean it's resistant to the antibiotics, but it means it ignores it. And there are some studies that show with persisters, if you wake the germ back up, they'll start responding to the antibiotic. But according to some Petri dish experiments from Northeastern University out in Boston about 3 or 4 years ago, probably about 20% of spirochete form of Lyme, that's the corkscrew, and 20% of the cyst form of Lyme have the ability to turn into persisters, okay? And so many of us are starting to think that the reason people have a hard time recovering from Lyme, there's a subset that probably is because their germs are in these persister states and they just choose to ignore the antibiotics, all right? So there's been a lot of looking at, well, what do we use? Horowitz a while back came up with a plan to use a drug called dapsone, and I'll probably say more about that later tonight. And then most recently, there is the newest kid on the block is Antabuse. All right, now, the thing about Antabuse regarding what we know about it is based initially on, so there were these laboratory experiments that caught people's interest. A colleague of mine, Dr. Liegner, out east, was asked by one of his patients to go on it. And eventually he published a paper, I think it was in March of this year, that showed the experience of working with it with 3 of his patients, okay? And all 3 of those patients had dramatic improvements. One claimed that they were cured. And so suddenly it looked like this was going to be the it drug that was going to do it for everyone. And what I can tell you is it probably is not the it drug that's going to do it for everyone. So Liegner at the meeting presented more findings, and he showed a slide that described the benefits that he is seeing, and I think it was about 35 people. It was 30 to 35 people. And in there, he tried to express the kind of improvements people were getting. The best improvements were people that went into something called extended relapse. And so on this chart of about 35 people, there were only 7 that he classified as being extended remission, not relapse. we don't want relapse. Extended remission. Okay. So in that chart he showed, it was only 7 people. Well, not only, but 7 of the 35 or so people he showed were in extended remission. Others were in various levels of improvement. So it's not clear yet how beneficial this drug is going to be for everyone that uses it. Okay. All right, now about the drug, how we think it works. It's not clear from laboratory experiments whether this actually has an antibiotic effect, meaning it's killing germs, or has another effect. But the structure of disulfiram, the chemical disulfiram, is made up of something called a disulfide bond. It has 2 sulfate groups that are bonded together, a disulfide bond, okay? And disulfide groups are thought to be really good at breaking down biofilms. So biofilms are a slime layer that Lyme can grow, that can cover it. And these biofilms have multiple layers. They have many kinds of bacteria that live in them. It's like this whole functioning community that is covering Lyme germs, basically, okay? And it appears that we're starting, a lot of my colleagues are thinking is that maybe the way that really this disulfiram is working is it's busting up these biofilms so that the antibiotics and the immune system can get in and get at these germs, okay? Now, in the pure form, the way that Antabuse has been used, a number of people have just been using it alone without any other antibiotics. And some of those people are getting benefits, okay? But it may be more beneficial to use Antabuse actually with other antibiotics. And that's because, again, probably the way it's working is it's busting up biofilms. And so people may be getting better because their immune system can come in and attack these germs then. But we may be able to augment the effect of the Antabuse by having people on other antibiotics. And probably as I look at this, and some of my discussions with my colleagues would suggest, the antibiotics that you might want to couple Antabuse with would be ones that treat intracellular infections. That means they can get inside of cells, and they can also get inside of the Lyme germs, and they might even get inside of some of these other germs that make up the biofilm communities to cause them to further destruct, okay? So intracellular antibiotics are things like rifampin, might be the tetracyclines like a doxycycline, a minocycline, might be things like macrolides, which would be the zithromax and Biaxin medicines that you use, okay? So it appears that a number of people are no longer using Antabuse on its own. That a number of my colleagues are starting to use it coupled with other antibiotics, okay? And so it is something I'll probably be able to report back over the next 6 months as I start introducing this into my practice and learn from my own standpoint how to work with this better. But there are people getting good benefits. 7 out of 35 extended remission in Liegner's a group of patients he's treating right now. Dr. Brian Fallon out at Columbia is in the process of creating a well-designed research project looking at this, trying to see if he can document from a research standpoint if this works and how it works. Okay, so I think he's taking enrollment on that right now. So there's a lot of excitement about Antabuse. But again, I would caution everyone now, based on what I saw out in Boston, I do not think this is the drug that's going to solve the problem for everybody. I do think there are some people that are going to get great benefit from it, though. Okay. The other thing I want to be careful about. So this drug, Antabuse, has a very long, what's called half-life. Okay. That means the amount of time once the drug is in you, a half-life is the amount of time that it takes for half of it to get out of you. Okay. And a drug is completely removed at 4 half-lives from the body. All right. So the estimated half-life on this drug, I believe, is up to 120 hours. I mean, it's extremely long. Okay. So the problem is if it's causing a severe herx in you, as it can, it may take forever for the medicine to get out of you to stop that herx. So one of the things that I'm suggesting when people are using this, and Liegner probably hasn't been doing this because Liegner is pretty much a conventional straight up prescription guy. Okay, he doesn't work with a lot of supplements and herbs. But knowing that this causes such a huge herx, I strongly recommend, and we'll be working with people on being on things that block Herxheimer reactions, okay? And the 2 things that I would really recommend people doing when they're coupling with their Antabuse is to use curcumin. Curcumin is a component of turmeric. It gets inside white blood cells and blocks the production of cytokines. Cytokines are inflammation chemicals that get kicked up whenever you have a Herxheimer reaction. They would give you most of your symptoms, okay? And the other thing I would couple that, and so that would be, I like using a liposomal variety, meaning it's microscopically wrapped in fat to increase absorption. And the product I like for that is something called Mariva 500 by Thorne. And I would recommend 500 milligrams, which is 1 pill 3 times a day. And I would couple that with a liposomal variety of glutathione. Glutathione is the master antioxidant that repairs damage in our cells. But as an antioxidant, it helps remove some of those toxins that are getting released because it's a good an antioxidant used by the liver to detox. Therefore, it helps remove a lot of the toxins that get released when you start killing these germs as well, too. And as an antioxidant, it blocks white blood cells from getting the signals that tell them to make cytokines, okay? So I think a good regimen to use if you're going to use Antabuse to make it so that you might be able to ramp up the dose more quickly and to tolerate it would be to be on a Mariva 500 curcumin, 1 pill 3 times a day, coupled with 5 milliliters, which is a teaspoonful of a liposomal glutathione, like a Trifortify orange or a Trifortify watermelon by Research Nutritionals. And that would be 1 teaspoon once a day, or even 1 teaspoon twice a day would be a good regimen. Okay. Now, if you are a person that happens to have turmeric allergies or curcumin allergies, Another thing you could use to block cytokine production inside your white blood cells is a bioflavonoid chemical called quercetin. Okay, so quercetin is a chemical that comes from the skin of colorful fruits and vegetables. It comes as a 250 milligram pill. It's used to help lower cytokine production inside white blood cells. The other advantage that it has, especially if you're somebody with allergies, is it stabilizes cells that make histamines, so it can help limit allergy reactions too. Okay, but if you happen to have curcumin allergies, I'd suggest quercetin instead. It comes as a 250 milligram pill, and you want to do 2 of those 3 times a day, coupled with your glutathione. Okay, so Ligner, again, wrote his stuff. I know many people of you looked out there. The disadvantage of what Ligner has written is he did not talk about what to do to block the Herx reaction. So I'm trying to give you some ideas on what to do about that so that you can use this drug a little bit more quickly and aggressively. Okay. And then again, finally, I don't know about costs. Take a look at goodrx.com. They'll give you an idea of what this does. In terms of side effects, so some people on Antabuse can develop mental health side effects, and that could be a limiting factor for some of those patients, okay? But the other common side effects would be headaches, an allergic rash, allergic dermatitis, and believe it or not, fatigue can be another common side effect. And in some men, it creates difficulty getting erections, okay? So those would be some of the more common side effects. Probably after you've been on it for about 2 weeks to a month, be a good idea to get liver testing done to see if there's any liver inflammation caused by this medicine as well too. Okay, all right. So I hope that gives you some answers there. I think it's going to be a great drug. I don't think it's going to be the it treatment that's going to solve the problem for everybody that we were all thinking it was. Okay, all right. Thanks for your question, Nancy. Sorry it was so long-winded, but I wanted to give you all the details I knew about that. Okay. Let's see. All right, let's see here. All right, next question is from Charlene. Hi, Charlene. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Hope you had a great weekend in Boston at the ILADS conference. Can you tell us maybe if you saw Dr. Burrascano Jr. about the new paradigm in Lyme, borreliosis in American people? And also Dr. Theoharides and brain mast cells and mitochondrial DNA involvement. And lastly, Dr. Suluk now saying cannabis for Lyme instead of CBD oil. He said that THC can cause yeast in some. Thank you so the answer to your question is yes, I saw Dr. Burrascano's talk. Yes, I saw Dr. Theoharides' talk. No, I did not see Dr. Suluk's because I was actually involved in another conference at that time. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to go in. I don't think I learned anything new from any of those conversations, but more of a reinforcement. Dr. Theoharides is very good about talking about mast cell activation syndrome. And the information I have at treatlyme.net, if you, in the search bar, just write mast cell activation syndrome, you'll see the stuff I know about mast cell activation syndrome. If somebody gives me a specific question about it later, I'll be glad to explain that. Burrascano is talking about using a lot of, well, it's hard to say. I'll hold off on describing what he's talking about. It's a little complex. But anyhow, yeah, there you go. In terms of Dr. Suluk's talk, I just didn't see it. Okay. All right. Let's see. And thank you for your comments thank you for your time and effort to this. Always love what you are doing. Thank you very much. So later on and we may see, I may answer what they describe more as I respond to some of the further questions tonight. Okay. All right. Thanks, Charlene. Hello, Barbara. Let's see. Dear Dr. Ross, would you please say something about knee problems with chronic Lyme disease? I have been paying special attention by exercising, getting physical therapies, also Feldenkrais treatments, making my own bone broth, taking mineral salts, and yet something seems to be eating my knee bones. I may have to get injections or even knee replacement. Find this verdict very discouraging. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. All right, so there's, I guess, a couple underlying factors that I have seen in my practice when it comes to knee pain and Lyme, okay? Number one, Lyme likes to live in areas that doesn't have good oxygen. Okay, so places it likes to live would be inside your joints. Okay, it also likes to live in tendons and which are the way that muscles attach to bones around the joints is through tendons, and it likes to live in ligaments, which are the structures that hold your bones to one bone to another bone. Okay, so we can find Lyme in the joint and also the structures that hold the joint together. All right. So one thing that happens is in those structures, it can lead to a lot of inflammation. So some of the pain that people can get when it comes to knee pain would be inflammation knee pain from having the germ living there. Okay. Now, you probably heard me tonight already describe or say something about cytokines. I talked about those chemicals in terms of they're what get elevated in a Herx reaction. But actually, cytokines are what get elevated when you have Lyme. They're also what get elevated when you have mold toxin illness. They're what that get elevated when you have too many yeast living in your symptoms, okay, or in your intestines, okay? So essentially what happens, let me just talk briefly about cytokines. Many of you have heard this talk before, but let me just briefly summarize it. So when white blood cells see things in you that aren't supposed to be there, they try to get rid of them. And they release a group of chemicals called cytokines. And there's many kinds of cytokines, all right? Now, cytokines are good and bad. On the good side, they cause more white blood cells to be made. They draw those white blood cells to where an infection or a mold toxin or a yeast is. And then they help those white blood cells work better at getting rid of those foreigners, okay? All right? Now, that's all fine and good, except if the immune system is having a hard time getting rid of those things, then what happens is it ramps up and it keeps trying harder and harder, and eventually it overproduces cytokines. Now, cytokines in excess give you brain fog. They make it so you can't think. They make you hurt all over. They lead to inflammation in your joints. They give you fatigue. They disturb your sleep. I mean, doesn't this sound like Lyme disease symptoms? Okay, so actually, the majority of Lyme disease symptoms and the majority of mold toxicity symptoms and the majority of yeast symptoms are all due to too many cytokines, okay? All right? Now, when you start killing germs, guess what happens? The immune system sees those dead bug parts and the toxins get released and makes more cytokines, and that's called a Herxheimer reaction, okay? All right? So in terms of controlling cytokines, there's some things you can do. And I mentioned those already, okay, in the previous question. One would be curcumin, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. If you're allergic, take quercetin, 250 milligrams, 2 pills 3 times a day. And then get on some form of liposomal glutathione, okay? And you would want to do a teaspoon or a once or twice a day on that, okay? That'd be kind of the essential things I would recommend there, all right? Okay, so do that. Okay, second thing that can happen when you have Lyme in your joints is it can lead to quicker destruction of your cartilage. All right, and probably the reason for that is Lyme likes to get as deeply and as far away from blood flow as it can, because oxygen that's in blood is toxic to Lyme. It kills it, okay? So Lyme likes to burrow, and it releases all these enzymes that can destroy tissue so it can burrow into the tissue, all right? And I think, and I don't have any science that proves this, okay, but I think that it's doing it in the cartilage of the joints too. So wherever you have a joint, you have two bones that come together, okay? This would be like the top bone on your knee joint. This is the bottom one, okay? And what happens is these inside the joint, the covering of the bones is made up of a layer of cartilage. Cartilage is softer than the bone it covers, and it's supposed to be smooth. And what its operation is supposed to do is allow these bones to glide over each other easily. The other thing is that softer part of it that makes it a good shock absorber, okay? The trouble is if it starts getting worn down, either from using it in life or from something eating away at it, like Lyme releasing toxins to burrow into it, you wind up getting bone rubbing on bone. And that leads to inflammation, okay? So the other thing, though, that you could try is to help support your cartilage and maybe even rebuild the cartilage. And that's to use something called glucosamine sulfate. Not glucosamine chondroitin, but just straight glucosamine sulfate. 500 milligrams 3 times a day. And I suggest that people give it a trial of about 2 to 3 months to see if it makes any difference. If by 2 to 3 months of using it, you're just seeing no improvements at all, then stop it. It's probably not going to work. My experience says it probably helps about 80 to 85% of the time in a situation like this. Okay. All right. So what I would suggest for you, and if you were a patient seeing me in my practice, what I would say in a situation like this is get on your curcumin or quercetin, get on your glutathione, and then also start trying to rebuild your cartilage using glucosamine. Okay. Now, finally, the last thing that can really help, especially if you've got cartilage destroyed, for some reason, doing exercise that allows your bones to glide over each other actually can be helpful in situations like this. That doesn't mean pounding exercise, like going out and running and doing marathons, okay? It may mean doing things like an elliptical trainer or a stationary bike. Those things, by using the joints, sometimes it actually can help lead to better healing of those joints as well, too. Okay? All right? So good luck to you, Barbara. I hope that gave you the answers you were wondering about. Hello, Miranda. Let's see. I've tested negative for Babesia, but I've had intermittent mild night sweats since being diagnosed with Lyme. Symptoms left after a year of treatment are headaches, leg aches, and night sweats. I did 4 to 5 months of Malarone, 2 months of Coartem, just started this and will likely keep going, and about 6 months of Babesia herbs of Sida acuta, artemisinin, and cryptolepis. Nothing has stopped the night sweats. I've also had my hormones and thyroid tested, which all came back negative. In your experience, what is the next step in regards to diagnosis and treatment options in a situation like this? I'm in my 30s and not menopausal. Thank you for putting that last part in there, because I was wondering if it's menopause, sometimes that can give you, or perimenopause, a period leading up to menopause, and menopause sometimes can give you night sweats. But no, I guess that's not going to be the situation here. All right, so let me start with Babesia testing. It's not perfect. Okay, that's the one thing I want you to know. So probably who's doing the best Babesia testing would be IGeneX at this point. And they have 2 ways of doing it. You can get a test to see if you're making antibodies against Babesia. And the other test that you can get from them is a microscope exam called a FISH test. And what FISH stands for is fluorescent in situ hybridization. And what that mouthful means is that basically they take a fluorescing marker that attaches to Babesia, I believe the Babesia DNA, and then they look to see if they can see it. Okay, it's a way of making it so you can visually see the Babesia. Now, the problem with their antibody tests is they have the ability to test against 2 strains. Okay, and the problem with their FISH test is you got to have tons of Babesia in you for it to find it. All right, so these tests are not perfect. There are some estimates that we might have about 15 to 20 strains of Babesia, so you can already see the problem with testing is it often is going to miss if you have it, okay? So deciding if somebody has Babesia is a matter often of looking at what the symptoms tell us, okay? So symptoms that make one think of Babesia are night sweats, okay? But Babesia triggers a dysfunction within what's called the sympathetic parasympathetic system. That's your adrenaline, anti-adrenaline system, okay? And so when you get that imbalance that you go back and forth between adrenaline and anti-adrenaline, you get symptoms related to that. And so some of those symptoms can be frontal headaches, okay? So night sweats, frontal headaches. Sometimes people have, and this is one symptom that I think is very interesting. Sometimes people with Babesia get frequent deja vu experiences, like daily or multiple times a day. And when it's there, it becomes a really useful symptom to follow to see if treatment is done. So although you didn't list deja vu here, look back to the beginning before you were treating for Babesia. And if you had a lot of deja vu then and it's gone, it may be an indication that your Babesia is resolved. Okay, that's been what my experience has been in my practice. Okay. Other things that make you think about Babesia is you can get these little red blood blisters on your skin. If you have multiple ones of those, that sometimes can indicate that Babesia is active. Because of this adrenaline, anti-adrenaline excess, sometimes you get into periods where your heart will just start racing all of a sudden and then slow down. Sometimes people with Babesia have a hard time keeping their blood pressure up when they stand up. So these are all things that make me wonder about Babesia. Okay, so now let me see what you wrote here. You said after 1 year, you're still having headaches and night sweats. So I still would want to know more about whether you have some of those other symptoms, okay? Or if you had some of those other symptoms that I described and they're now gone, that would kind of speak against Babesia, all right? But let's say you've got some of those symptoms and you still have headaches and you still have night sweats. I would continue to try to find a treatment that might work for your Babesia. So the question is what? Let me see what you've done here again. Okay. So I'm going to flip. We're going to go look at an article I've written together because I'm going to give you some other ideas by looking at this article together. Okay. There are some other things you can try. Let me do a screen share here. All right. So this is my Lyme information site. You can find pretty much anything you want to know about Lyme disease. You can find. I probably have written an article about most things these days. Okay. All right. And you can find it here under this tab. Okay. All right. So look under infection treatment plans and take a look at this article called Kills Babesia, a Brief Guide. Okay, and in here I describe various approaches to treating Babesia and I break them into different tiers. So there's tier 1, and you've done some of these tier 1 treatments. These are ones that involve using atovaquone, which is the chemical that's found in Malarone and also is found in something called Mepron. Okay, all right. Now, one option that you could consider would be instead of using Malarone, would be to actually go to Mepron, which is the atovaquone, okay? And instead of doing 5 milliliters 2 times a day, would be to double that up to 10 milliliters 2 times a day. I would also combine it with 2 other medicines that can treat Babesia. I would probably combine it with azithromycin, 500 milligrams 1 time a day, and you might consider combining it also with a doxycycline at 1 or 2 pills 2 times a day. Okay. Now, interesting enough, doxycycline used to be an antibiotic we would use to treat malaria. And it so happens that because Babesia is a blood parasite that gets in blood cells and acts like malaria, we find benefit by using malaria treatments. Okay. So one option you might consider is to use a treatment that, yes, uses the atovaquone you've used before, but at a whopping dose compared to what you used before, and then combine it with an azithromycin and a doxycycline, okay? I've tried that before with some success, all right? You've already done the artemisinin option, and you combine that with cryptolepis, which is here. So I don't think that's another option for you. You've done my other tier 2 option, which is the coartem. That's this artemether. I can never say this second word, but this is coartem. Okay. You've done that. Okay. All right. Now, another option for you to consider is an old time malaria treatment that can work in some people when nothing else does. And that's to use a combination of clindamycin and hydroxychloroquine. Hydroxychloroquine is a quinine medicine. Okay. And that would be to use up to 600 milligrams a day of clindamycin coupled with 200 milligrams a day, twice a day, the hydroxychloroquine, okay? Now, the downside of this is quinine medicine sometimes can hurt your hearing and cause neuropathy. And if you get into that, you have to stop using them, okay? The other downside of this kind of a treatment is that it sometimes just creates a lot of side effects. This combination has a lot more side effects and which would be nausea, diarrhea, abdominal pain, allergic type reactions to the quinine, muffled hearing. These are things you have to be concerned about. So it tends to be a harder to tolerate regimen, but this is another option for you as well too. Okay. All right. So those are some thoughts for you. There is, gosh, I'm blanking. There is one other option I have that which I did not write about. I'm blanking on it. I'll have to think about it as we're talking about for some of these other questions tonight, and I'm sure it'll come to me. Okay. All right. Go back here. All right. So, Miranda, if for some reason tonight I don't come back and tell you the third option that I'm blanking on right now, write me an email. My email address is docmarty, DOCMARTY, at martyrossmd.com. Write to me and say, Dr. Ross, what was the third option? Okay, it's kind of a last resort option. I'm remembering half of it, but I'm not remembering the second part of it. It's a drug that starts with the letter L, and it's my 50-year-old brain is betraying me right now. So anyhow, just write to me, and I'll be glad to look that up and send that as an option to you as well. Okay, all right. Thanks for that question. Good luck to you. Alexandra, let's see. Good evening, Dr. Ross. 6 months ago, I moved out from an old apartment that had mold on the bathroom wall. I've moved into a mold-free place, but have worries about if I should get rid of all belongings I had from my old apartment. Some say that Lyme sufferers need to be that drastic. What do you think? I think some Lyme sufferers have to be that drastic, but not everyone does. Okay. So I would, if you've left, so first of all, just because you had mold growing on your bathroom wall does not mean it was hurting you. Okay. All right. So not everybody that is exposed to mold and mold toxins develops mold toxicity illness. Let me tell you what I mean by that. All right. So there's two problems you can get when you have mold exposures. One, you could have allergic reactions to the mold, or you could have irritation. It can act as an irritant in the airwaves. Okay, those mold toxins when you breathe them in. Removing yourself from the mold situation will take care of those problems, all right? If you're not being exposed anymore, you're not going to be having allergic reactions or irritant reactions, okay? All right, but the other problem that can happen in 25% of people that have mold exposures, and so I want you to hear that, 25% of people have a problem where they cannot get rid of mold toxins once they've been exposed, which means that 75% of us can walk through a building of mold toxins and not get affected by it, okay? All right? I want to be clear about that, all right? So 25% of people can develop something called mold toxicity illness, and we think it's due to a genetic defect where your immune system is not programmed correctly to tag mold toxins when they get in you to break them down. All right. So what happens in 75% of people is our immune system sees a mold toxin in our bloodstream that we either breathe in, drink in, or eat in, and it tags it. And other parts of the immune system come in and break that mold toxin down, and then we poop out and pee out the remnants of that mold toxin. Okay. But if you happen to be one of the 75%, what happens is, one of the 25% with mold toxicity problems is they don't get tagged. Those toxins don't get tagged. They go to the liver as a fat-based toxin, and the liver is unable to transform them into a water-based toxin. And if they could, as a water-based toxin, these toxins would get mixed in our poop and we'd poop them out. Okay. But because the liver can't do that, what happens is they come out of the liver still as a fat-based toxin. They go out into the intestines and they get reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. And so you just get this endless loop of toxins that just keeps recirculating in you. And those toxins trigger excess cytokines, okay? Now, the only way to know if you have excess mold toxins in you is to test for them, okay? Now, some people do the genetic profile testing called an HLA-DQ test, or DR test, actually, HLA-DR. But I have found even if you have the genetic predisposition does not mean that you have the problem. So in other words, having genetic profile that may cause this to happen doesn't mean that your body actually manifests it, okay? So the only real way to know is if you have too many mold toxins in you is to pee in a cup and send it to a lab that has the ability to test for those mold toxins, all right? So there are two labs that do that here in the States. One is a lab out of Texas called Real Time Labs. And there's another one out of someplace in the middle of the country, and I think it's Kansas, if I'm right, called Great Plains Lab. And they both offer mold toxin testing. Real Time is expensive. It's about $795. Great Plains does it for around $300, okay? Great Plains is a newer kid on the block. They use two different techniques, actually. I can tell you as I re-enter practice, I'm probably going to be going more to the Great Plains. I used to do real times, but for that cost differential, I'm going to probably be doing the Great Plains lab. Okay, so you may want to see if you can order a kit from Great Plains, take it to your doctor, see if they'll sign it so there's an official doctor ordering it, pee in your cup, send it off, and find out, do you really have a problem to be worried about? Okay, all right. So that's what I would recommend. And then in terms of, do you have to get rid of everything? Well, see how you're doing. If you're in the new environment and you're doing better, and then you get a test back that says you don't pee out mold toxins, you may not need to. If, however, you're in your new environment and you're still feeling really sick and nothing seems to be helping you, then you might want to consider it, okay? So there's not an absolute as to whether you have to get rid of stuff or not get rid of stuff, okay? All right. Good luck to you. Hello, David. Let's see. Hello, Dr. Ross. Thank you for all you do for those struggling with chronic illness. You're welcome. Let's see. As you know, Lyme can reactivate viruses in the body, mainly EBV and HHV6. What can one use to control these viruses and put them back into remission with Lyme or other co-infections? Lastly, is glutathione supplementation for EBV a good thing? And how should one go about supplementing with glutathione if they have an MTHFR mutation? Thank you, Dr. Ross. All right. So let me give you Marty Ross's philosophy on chronic virus infections, okay? So even if they reactivate, I don't think everyone needs to do anything about them. And I know that sounds shocking, but let me try to explain why I'm saying that, okay? So if we were to do studies, and I've seen these studies before, and my numbers are going to be a little rough here, but just hear me out on this, okay? So if you were to pull 100 healthy people off the street, you would see elevated antibodies against either Epstein-Barr, HHV6, cytomegalovirus, parvovirus B19, okay? And these are in healthy people, right? Their immune systems are making antibodies. And probably what it means is their immune systems are keeping the germs in check. That's what we want the immune system to do, okay? All right. Now, if you were to pull, and that occurs about 10 to 20% of people. So 10 to 20% of healthy people have elevated antibodies against these viruses, and yet they're healthy, okay? So just having these viruses in you and having elevated antibodies does not mean they're causing a problem. It may just mean your immune system is doing what it's supposed to do, which is keeping these germs under control. Okay? All right. All right. Now, if you were to pull 100 people off the street that have fatiguing illnesses of some kind, you would find probably around 30 or 40% have elevated antibodies against these viruses, suggesting that because there's more people that have the antibodies, maybe this suggests that viruses become part of the problem, that the immune system loses the ability to keep them under control. Okay, so it's possible. All right. So when somebody has Lyme disease, why has the immune system lost the ability to keep these viruses under control? What I would argue is it's Lyme. It's the cytokine excess caused by Lyme that causes immune dysfunction. It's the lack of sleep caused by the cytokines. It's the adrenal dysregulation that happens because of cytokines in Lyme. It's all right. So it's all these Lyme-related problems. Okay. So what my approach is I don't even test for the chronic viruses in the first 6 to 9 months of a treatment, because even if they're elevated, I don't think you need to take specific antivirus agents. I think what the treatment is to kill Lyme, kill the Lyme co-infections, and then try to reverse the effects of cytokine excess, okay? So what that means is following the Ross Lyme support protocol, all right? And many of you are aware of that. You can find that at treatlyme.net. And the key things in that are get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, okay? Getting sleep lowers cytokines. It also helps your immune system work better. And if you have to drug yourself or you have to take herbals to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, do it. You need to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, okay? Number 2, lower cytokines, all right? So I've already talked tonight about how to do that, curcumin or quercetin, coupled with some glutathione, okay? All right. Number 3, do something to boost your adrenals, all right? So I like using ashwagandha. If you have some people, I will tell you, ashwagandha is something called a nightshade plant. And so ashwagandha may lead to more inflammation in some people, but try it out. If it doesn't give you more inflammation, keep using it. Okay. All right. Number 4, take care of yeast if you have it in your intestines, get it out. Number 5, be on a good multivitamin. Number 6, take something to help with detoxification, like a glutathione. The next thing is be on a healthy diet. And at the beginning of treatment, I often suggest just getting on a good paleo diet that is also rich in fruits and vegetables. Okay. And then lastly, treat your Lyme and treat your co-infections. Okay. Go down that pathway for 6 to 9 months. And often you never need to do anything about the chronic viruses, because guess what happens? The immune system kicks back in and takes care of them. Okay. All right. Then I want to caution you that elevated antibodies does not mean the germ has gone active. Okay. So what I like to do is to do a test to see if viruses might be active. I tend not to rely on doing antibody levels. I tend to do a test which is called a nagalase. Okay. I'm going to show you an article you can look at here in a minute that has all this stuff in it. Okay. So what a nagalase is, it's an enzyme that is made by the covering of viruses. Okay. And it's meant to deactivate a type of white blood cell called macrophages. All right. And so what you can do is you can measure if you have excess production of nagalase. And basically, it is kind of an indirect way at looking at virus germ load in your body. All right. So if you have a high nagalase, that suggests that there are lots of viruses in you that might be active. It doesn't even tell you which one. It just says there's lots of viruses. Okay. All right. So that's how I like trying to figure out if I should go after viruses or not at 6 to 9 months, not at the beginning. Okay. Let's see here. And what do I like to use? Well, the things I like to use to treat viruses, I like using olive leaf extract. I like turning the immune system on with mushrooms or transfer factors to go after those viruses. Okay. Glutathione is not necessarily going to treat your viruses. It's going to help detox. It's going to help lower cytokines. Okay. It is okay to use glutathione with an MTHFR mutation as well too. All right. All right. So I've just said a lot. Let me give you the article, because the article talks about dosing as well. Okay. So let me go ahead there for a minute here. All right. So where you can find all this stuff about viruses, there's a few places you could, but take a look under my infection treatment plans. And it's called, this is the article, When and How to Treat Chronic Viruses in Lyme, a brief guide, okay? And you notice the title is When and How. The when is what I'm trying to emphasize here. You may not need to do anything about them, okay? All right, so in terms of the nagalase test, I write about it here. And so that's one possibility. The lab that does it is a lab out of New Jersey called Health Diagnostics Laboratory, okay? And then the things I like to do to treat it, I like to be on either olive leaf or monolaurin. Olive leaf is actually my preferred thing. And then I like to do things to boost cellular immunity, which is the cells that fight virus and even Lyme, by using reishi mushrooms or thymic protein A or transfer factors, okay? And the transfer factors that target viruses, there's a product made by research nutritionals called transfer factor plasmic. All right. And you can read about it here. You can read more about transfer factors here too in this article. Okay. All right. So the one thing I want everyone to realize, when you treat Lyme, there can be many abnormalities in the body that add together to give this thing called Lyme disease. Okay. And you don't have to correct every one of them. You just got to correct enough of them so the rest of the body turns on to deal with the rest of the mess. Okay. That's what you got to do. All right. So for instance, heavy metal toxicity is one of those things that I, in my practice, used to treat pretty aggressively. But for a lot of people, I have not found great benefit in going after it. I will sometimes go after it when the story tells me that it really was the major problem. They didn't get sick until they had their heavy metal exposure, for instance. Then I might go for it right away. But sometimes it's something I'm not going to consider until 6 to 9 months into treatment as well. Okay. Because I have found in terms of things that make the biggest difference, it tends to be a later thing that I would consider for most people. Okay. All right. Now, one other thing I just want to show you, because I forgot to show you when I was there. I'm going to go back here real quick. All right. So in terms of the basic steps that I think anyone should be doing to get over their Lyme, it's my treatment protocol right here. Okay. I call it the Ross Lyme Support Protocol. And in here, you're going to see sleep that I talked about, a diet, cytokine control, be on something that supports the adrenals, etc. It's all here. Okay. So if you're looking at specific doses and how I recommend doing it, that's where you take a look. All right. David, thank you for that question. Good luck to you. Hello, Stuart. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I got bit in mid-July, and I'm ready to go with 3 combo of amoxicillin, clarithromycin, Phagogen, and our S-unate. Do you think I should go on the antibiotics or go straight onto a low dose of disulfiram? I have been told to do 2 months on these antibiotics, although you recommend 4 months on your website. Okay. It's a good question. I still think that the jury is out as to whether disulfiram is going to be the drug that works for everyone. Okay. And again, as I said, if we look at some of the data that Dr. Liegner presented in Boston, it looks like 7 out of his, I think 35 patients have gone into what he calls extended remission, which means everyone else has some degree of symptoms. Okay. So I just don't think that Antabuse, disulfiram is the it drug for everyone. My approach, as I've thought about this when I get back into practice, is for people that are new to my practice that really haven't done much treatment in the way of antibiotics. I'm probably going to go antibiotics for about 4 to 6 months, regular antibiotic regimens for 4 to 6 months, and see where I can get. If I'm not getting far enough, I think it's at that point I'm going to consider adding disulfiram in. Okay. I will tell you, many of my colleagues and I are trying to figure out when is the right time to do this. Should we do it at the beginning? Should we wait? And I think based on what I'm seeing out of Liegner's results that he was talking about, I'm probably going to wait a little bit to begin it with many of my patients. Okay. All right. I hope that answers your question. Good luck to you. Hello, Joyce. Let's see. Welcome back, Dr. Ross. Thank you. I was first diagnosed with Lyme in 2001 and have managed my symptoms using a holistic approach over the years, mainly keeping active and excellent nutrition. Over the years, I noticed my muscles not functioning as well as muscle wasting. I incorrectly attributed to aging. Now at 60 years old, I have shoulder pain on a daily basis, which affects my life greatly. Ironically, I am a clinical massage therapist. I recently came across information about the connection between Lyme and pyroluria. That's a mouthful for me. I would like to know your take on this, and in your opinion, do you believe this is curable? In terms of the pyroluria, I think there is a subset of people that it might be an issue. But again, I think it's more of a minor issue. It's one of those things I would consider if all the other standard approaches that I recommend aren't getting a person anywhere. Okay. So again, what do I consider standard approaches? Take a look at the Ross Lyme Support Protocol. You'll see at the last step of it, which I believe is step 14, I describe things to do at 6 to 9 months if nothing else is working. I don't have the treatment for the pyroluria in there, but that would be a phase that I would consider adding it as more at the 6 to 9 month. Okay. All right. I know, I believe it's Dietrich Klinghardt out here talks in the Seattle area, talks a lot about that. My impression is it's not as major of a problem for the majority of people with Lyme as Klinghardt would make it out to be. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Joyce. Hello, Rich. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I was diagnosed with CSD in 1979 with my only symptoms of slight flu-like feeling for a day or so and swollen lymph nodes in my upper thigh that was removed and sent for lab diagnosis. Fast forward to this year where I have been under the care of a functional medicine clinic for eye, joint, and muscle pain, general malaise, and fatigue. They ordered extensive blood, urine, and stool work, and all they can see my body is fighting off an infection. Nothing came back positive for Bartonella specifically. Is that possible? Okay, so I'm not sure what you mean by CSD. I wonder if you mean CLD, chronic Lyme disease, and maybe hit that wrong. The trouble is when people use initials like that, you may mean something different than I mean. Okay, so I just want to start by saying that. But if you're wondering if you have chronic Lyme disease or could you have a tick-borne disease or could you have Bartonella, what I would say is that probably you would have to look at the quality of testing that was done by your functional medicine doctor. Now, some know that standard Lyme testing that is done through regular labs is worthless, okay? But not all functional medicine doctors know that, all right? So in terms of determining could you have Lyme, it's possible based on your symptoms. You would want to make sure that you've had a high-quality Lyme test. And there are two directions I would suggest going. Both of these are tests that are offered by IGeneX, okay? So IGeneX is a specialty tick-borne infection lab out of California that does Lyme testing. They have a test called a Western blot, and they have a test called an immunoblot. What happens in both of these tests is both of these tests are looking to see, is your immune system making antibodies that attach to proteins found on the covering of the Lyme germ, okay? In the Western blot method of doing this, they actually grow 2 strains of Lyme in their lab, and then they remove the proteins and they, through a process, they distribute these proteins onto a test strip, and then they see, do your antibodies attach to these proteins, okay? Now keep in mind, it's against just 2 strains of Lyme, okay? That test has the ability to find Lyme, if you have it, about 80% of the time. And when it finds it, it's correct about 95% of the time. And those numbers that I just gave you are based upon what are called validation studies, where they look to see what is the ability of their test to find Lyme in known situations. Okay. All right. All right. All right. All right. So that's Western blot. It's about a $250 test. Okay. The other option is a newer test they're offering called an immunoblot, which is more expensive. It's about $495, but it is the better test, okay? And what the difference is between the Western blot and the immunoblot is in the immunoblot, they're using 8 different strains of Lyme, okay? The Western blot is 2, the immunoblot is 8, okay? That's one big difference. Secondly, what they do in their test technique is they are growing the Lyme proteins in the lab. They're not growing Lyme germs, but rather they're growing Lyme proteins inside bacteria, okay? All right? And then what they've done with their Lyme proteins, though, is they've genetically modified them so that they don't include amino acid or parts of their proteins that also happen to attach to which viruses, antibodies against viruses happen to attach, okay? So one of the problems with the Western blot is these proteins that these Lyme germs have, sometimes in the test technique, antibodies that your blood may have made against viruses happen to attach to the Lyme proteins because some of the amino acids that make up those Lyme proteins are found also on viruses, okay? To get away from that problem, in the immunoblot, they genetically modify these proteins by removing those parts of the protein that might attract virus antibodies, all right? So now, in this test technique, if you've got antibodies stuck on one of those Lyme proteins in the immunoblot, it is truly made against Lyme. It is not something that was made against a virus that happens to cross-attach, okay? All right. So this immunoblot test will find Lyme based upon their validation studies. They used to say 93% of the time, but I just saw information this week, and I think that puts it at about 95 to 96% of the time it can find it. And when it finds it, it's correct 100% of the time. Okay, so Western blot, which is lower cost, $250, will find Lyme 80% of the time, but will be incorrect about 5% of the time. Okay, versus the immunoblot, which is $495, will find Lyme if you have it about 95 to 96% of the time. And when it finds it, it's correct 100% of the time. Okay. I think both ways are valid. If you happen to be working with a doctor that understands Lyme and could look also at your symptoms well enough and make a decision if you have Lyme, then you could probably get by with just the Western blot. But if you have a doctor that doesn't really understand Lyme enough and the importance of a positive test is just really essential, in that case, I would put the money out on the immunoblot. Okay? All right. I know that's all complicated. Let me show you where I'm going to show you something to take a look at so that you understand how to explain this to your doctor a little bit better too. So I'm going to do a screen share. All right, so take a look. In my online guide, I have a section on test, which is right here. All right, and then take a look at this article I have called A Review of Lyme Infection Test, Pass or Fail. And in here, I cover a number of tests. I'm actually going to be updating this article. There's a couple new ones I want to add to this article, but this has the information you're going to need, okay? So there's the immunoblot that I was just describing. It's right here, all right? And then this is the immunoblot right here. And then this is the Western blot up here, okay? I described both of them in the article, all right? Now, in terms of when you get a hold of IGeneX likes to try to get people to do these huge blood test panels where you're going to pay thousands of dollars. Don't do it, okay? Just get the IGeneX Western blot or the immunoblot or the Western blot, okay? So the immunoblot test code numbers at IGeneX are test 325 and 335. And the Western blot code numbers are 188 and 189, okay? Do not do one of their huge big panels. You do not need to. Save your money, okay? All right. All right. That's my response. Good luck to you, Rich. Oh, Bartonella. In terms of Bartonella testing, so Bartonella, which is another bacteria that can be transmitted by ticks, can give a lot of neurologic problems. And so the best way to test for that is out of a lab in North Carolina called Galaxy Labs. They do something called an enhanced PCR. PCR is a technique we use to see if the DNA of the germ is in you. And their enhanced PCR method of testing for Bartonella has the ability to find 15 different strains of Bartonella, okay? And that's what I'm going to now start offering when I get back into practice here, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Rich. Hello, Mercedes. Is Lyme contagious? It's interesting. I just sent out an email to my newsletter group earlier talking about how Lyme can be transmitted. All right. So I've got a whole article about this, but I'll summarize it for you real quick. So the ways that we think Lyme can be spread, number one, ticks. Okay. I mean, that's where we have the most compelling evidence that it can be spread. Okay. However, there are European studies, primarily out of Poland, that say that mosquitoes, ticks, mites, and flies can carry the Lyme infection. The trouble is it doesn't prove they transmit the Lyme infection, okay? But there are other vectors that can carry it. And then in my practice, I have seen people that have gotten mosquito bites and got acutely sick with Lyme within a day or two of it, okay? So I think based on those European studies that say they can be transmitted in other vectors, and based upon my experience where I've got a couple people I know got it from mosquito bites, just clinically, I think there's other germs that can spread it, okay? Number two, the other way we know it can be spread is through placenta transfer during pregnancy. And we think that can happen about 50% of the time. How we know that is based on some pregnancy registries that were kept out in, I believe, Connecticut, out on the East Coast, late 80s, early 90s, where women that had Lyme allowed information to be collected about them. It wasn't a formal research, but they just allowed information to be collected. And what it showed is that if a woman that had Lyme was not on antibiotics during pregnancy, the baby would get it 50% of the time. If she was on antibiotics during pregnancy, the baby did not get it. Okay, so we know it can be spread through the placenta. Okay, number 3, we know it is in breast milk, and there are no research studies that prove it's transmitted in breast milk, but there are a number of my colleagues and myself who have seen patients that we think that is the only way they probably got it. Okay, all right, so we concerned about breast milk transmission. Okay, all right, now we start getting more into the controversial areas. Okay, could Lyme be sexually transmitted? We have no science that says it is. Now let me talk about that science, because you'll read a different opinion about that. Okay, we've got 2 studies out there that were kind of repeat of each other that showed it can be in the sexual fluids. All right, so it can be in the male ejaculate in men that have Lyme, and it can be in the vaginal fluid of females that have it. There's 2 different studies that came to the same conclusion, basically. Okay, one of them showed it was 100% of the time in the female vaginal fluid, 50% of the time in the male ejaculate. The other study showed reverse findings, which is that it was 50% of the time in the female vaginal fluid and 100% of the time in the male ejaculate. Okay, all right. But just being in fluids doesn't prove it transmits. Okay, so then if you try to read about sexual transmission, you are going to run into this article. It was an article that was authored by Stricker and I think Middelveen, if I'm right. Anyhow, there were two primary authors on it. Stricker at one time was head of ILADS. And Stricker went so far as to say, based on this study, that we now have more to fear in our bedroom than we do out in our backyard in the woods. And I think he's wrong. I think it's ridiculous what he said. But what they did in the study is it involved 13 people. Okay, now I will tell you, in medicine, a study that only involves 13 people is worthless. You cannot make any general conclusions for the whole population based on a study in just 13 people. Okay, all right. But in the 13 people, what they did is they looked to see what strain of Lyme was in the vaginal fluid and what strain of Lyme was in the male ejaculate. In the study of 13 people, there were 6 people, of which there were 3 couples. Okay. And in the couples, each one in the couple had identical strains of Lyme. So the authors took that as a conclusion that it's sexually transmitted. Okay. Now here's the big problem with the study. They didn't control for the last time that the male ejaculated into the female, meaning when they were measuring something in the vaginal fluid from the female, what we're concerned about in the female is, did it get into the vaginal fluid from her blood leaking the germs into her vaginal fluid? In which case, if it got in from her, it means she is carrying the infection. And if it happens to be the same strain as the male, yeah, you could say it probably was sexually transmitted, okay? On the other hand, they could have been measuring what was recently deposited in her vaginal fluid from her male partner that doesn't get into the bloodstream of her, okay? So in other words, what they're measuring may not be from the woman. It could have been from the last time her male partner ejaculated into her. And it doesn't mean she got infected, meaning it didn't get into the bloodstream, okay? So it's a worthless study, all right? Now, what do I see in my practice? I see that there are couples that are both symptomatic, and when I test both of them, they both come back positive. And I see that maybe about 20% of the time. So it leads me to think that there is the possibility it can be sexually transmitted, but I don't think it's universally sexually transmitted. Okay, that's the best I can say about that. If you want to take precautions, the best thing would be to use condoms probably, but there is no proof that this is sexually transmitted. Okay. All right. Then finally, could it be spread through your toothbrush, sharing a toothbrush, kissing, holding hands, sharing food? I don't think so. All right. I have never seen that as a way I think somebody got it. There is no science that suggests it can be spread that way. So my impression is probably not. Okay. All right. Now, let me just show you this article so that you can read more about this and share it if you want to share it too. All right. So take a look in this, my online guide again, take a look at this about Lyme disease section. And then here's the article. It's called How Do People Get Lyme? It's More Than Ticks. Okay. All right. Then the other thing I would take a look at, I'm going to go in here. So in terms of sexual transmission, because that issue raises a bunch of questions for people. Okay. So can Lyme be sexually transmitted? I say yes. I think it's a small percentage. But that raises questions like, should I have my healthy sexual partner tested for Lyme? But shouldn't I have my sexual partner tested to prevent him or her from transmitting the germ back to me or after treatment? And should I tell my new sexual partner that I have Lyme? Should we use condoms? If you want to see my opinion and what I suggest on all of those, read this article. Okay? All right. And the article is called, Can Lyme Be Sexually Transmitted? Yes. Okay? There. All right. Thanks for that question. All right, hold on here, everyone. I got some water. Hello, ME. Let's see. I've got late-stage Lyme disease from a tick bite that was misdiagnosed as ringworm in 1988. Now I'm living in Arizona and I cannot find a doctor who has a clue about Lyme. For your protocols, do you recommend working with an MD? Are there any suggestions for finding doctors who work with your protocols? P.S. I'm very impressed that you are following the research of people like Dr. Kim Lewis. Thank you. Kim Lewis, everyone, is... I mentioned earlier tonight that there was a research project out of Northeastern University out of Boston that was the first one to really describe that we have these things called persisters. That came out of Dr. Kim Lewis's lab. And then Kim Lewis is the one that spoke publicly about research. I think that was actually done in California. The research that said Antabuse might work did not come out of Kim Lewis's lab, although he spoke publicly about it. And that's how it fell into the radar screen of people like Ligner and me as well, too. But the research group that actually discovered Antabuse, I believe, is out of California. So anyhow, yes, I follow Kim Lewis. I follow a lot of the researchers because I want to know what can I do to help my patients, because we're not finding the results. No one's doing adequate. No one's not fair. I can't say no one, but there is just an inadequate amount of research coming out of the regular scientific community that is being done on humans, that we sometimes have to look at people that are doing the bench research, the lab research, like a Dr. Lewis and his lab, or Dr. Eva Shoppe and her lab out in New Haven, Connecticut. We've got to look at places like that, because otherwise we're just going to be sitting here twirling our fingers forever and people are not going to be getting well. So yes, I follow those scientists. I want to know what the things are I should be trying with my patients. Okay. All right. Anyhow, let's see. How can you find somebody to work with? Well, one thing you could consider. I am now reestablishing practice, and I am up in Seattle. You could become a full-fledged patient of mine, okay? And what I mean by that, I call it full medical service. That involves coming up here one time, I evaluate you, I examine you, and then I can prescribe and recommend tests for you, okay? All right. And then for patients that come to see me from afar, I like to see them in office at least 2 times a year. And then any other visits we do by follow-up we can do is phone or telemedicine visit, video telemedicine visits. Okay, so that's one option for you. Second option is a slightly different take, but it's still to work with me. And that is to do just telemedicine visits where you and I never see each other in the office. I don't get the advantage of examining you, but I still gather enough information by talking with you about what's going on. And then I can make recommendations for that. And I do work with people from Arizona. I work with people from around the world, actually. Okay. So that's an option for you to consider too. Okay. Third option would be to see about finding a naturopath or finding a functional medicine doctor that is also a member of ILATS. All right. So you're going to have to do some crosswork here. All right. So To find out who is a member of ILADS where you live down in Arizona, you go to ilads.org, go to the Contact Us page, and in there's a way you can work to ask who are doctors in my area. Okay. Then you want to cross-reference that with a list that you get from ifm.org, which is the Institute for Functional Medicine, and see which of their members happen to also be members of ILADS. That might be one way to go about doing it as well, too. Okay? All right. Let me show you one thing here because I mentioned my consult service. So here. So my clinic, you can find links to my clinic now on both of my websites. So you can click here, up here to get to my clinic website, or at Marty Ross MD Supplements, where you can find all the supplements I think are the best ones to use. You can click here on the clinic to get over to my clinic, okay? But my clinic, where I do these telemedicine visits and in-person visits, is at martyrossmd.com. Okay, that's my website. In terms of the appointments that I offer, there are two classes of appointments. There's what I call my limited consult service, where I never examine you, so therefore I can't prescribe and I can't order tests, but I can give you tons of recommendations, even tell you which herbs to use, okay? And I give you a written report. That's one option. Or become a full medical service patient, where you actually come up here and I examine you at least once, okay? Now, at this time, the only visits I'm offering are the limited consult service because I just arrived back in Seattle a month ago and I have still not opened a clinical location. My clinical location, where I'll be offering these full medical service visits, is probably going to open on December 2nd. And I'm in the final stages of negotiating a lease with the landlord, who I'm waiting to get back the last draft to me that I hope to sign tomorrow or early next week. And at that time, I'll announce to the world through my various email platforms that I'm open. Okay. So anyhow, those are some options for you to consider. Okay. All right. Let's see here. You know, I think I forgot to do a screen share on that. I hope you followed the description, okay? Go to martyrossmd.com and you'll figure it out from there, okay? All right. Sorry about that, Emmy. And thanks for your question. Let's see here. Hello, Isa. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. My best friend has been sick for a few years now, and previously for a couple of periods over the last 12 years lasting months. He did have positive tests for Lyme, Bartonella, EBV, and has a few Bartonella symptoms that come and go, but his main symptoms are persistent fatigue and malaise, flu-like sick feeling when he does more than an hour of activity a day. It seems clear that these are cytokine related, but we're not sure how to figure out the underlying cause. He just started nystatin to rule out yeast imbalance. What is the standard for looking at mold as the cause? My friend has lived in buildings that probably have mold and behind the walls. Is that enough to cause issues? Is it worth testing his current home for spores? Worth getting a good air filter? What would you look at, or what would make you look at heavy metals? Are these reliable tests for this? Thank you so much for helping. Okay, so in terms of the mold, we talked about it earlier. I would get a hold of a test kit from Great Plains Lab. I believe they're in Kansas. Just Google Great Plains, and you want to do their urine mycotoxin test. It's about a $300 test, okay? You need to see if it's actually in him. Even if it's in the environment, that doesn't mean it's impacting him. Not everyone that gets exposed in the environment is a person that will develop mold toxicity problems. Only 25% of people do, okay? In terms of looking for heavy metals, I usually don't look for heavy metals until I've treated Lyme for about 6 to 9 months in the majority of people, unless I get a strong history that says it is heavy metals based on their history that caused the majority of the problems, okay? To do heavy metal testing, you need to work with a doctor that can do what's called a chelation challenged or a challenged test. And what that involves is taking a chelating agent like something called DMSA or EDTA, and then collecting urine for about 6 hours to see if you pee out excessive amounts of heavy metals, okay? it really sounds like what you need is somebody that is a good functional medicine doctor that understands Lyme, that can help steer through all these questions. You've got a lot of questions here. And for me to give you the best path through this, I would need to know more about the specific history of when things happened so that I could kind of gauge what do I think the greatest likelihood is of that thing causing a problem. Okay. So for instance, I have had a patient that came to me, say, I think it was about 2 years ago, that had been sent over by another, well, actually wasn't sent by another, but had seen another Lyme doctor in town that told him his brain was being fried and he needed to fly out to Washington, D.C. immediately to see GemSec to get on IV antibiotics because his brain was in jeopardy because of the Lyme that was infecting him. Okay? That's what she said. So I looked at him. He had positive Lyme testing. He had evidence he probably could have gotten Lyme disease. I think there were tick bites in the past. But as I listened to his history, he was doing great in life. He's out coaching football teams. He's running a financial business. He's doing great until he moved into that house that had black mold on the walls. All right? So I immediately went ahead and did mold toxin testing on him. And they came back sky high. I ignored the Lyme. He had all the symptoms of Lyme because they all look almost identical to mold toxin symptoms, okay? Because they're all cytokine excess symptoms. The only thing I ever did with him was to remove mold toxin. That's all I did. And within 6 months, he had his whole life back. I mean, he was disabled. He had lost his kids. He had lost his job. He was just barely surviving. And 6 months after he saw me, because I took a good history, I didn't treat a test. I took a history that said it's mold toxin illness. He's back living a full life now. Okay. So it's all about understanding how you got to this point. Just having Lyme infection does not mean you have Lyme disease. All right. Let me explain what I mean by that. So you can have a germ living in you and your immune system keeps it under control. That means you have the infection in you. Disease means it's causing you problems. Okay. And so just having a positive test doesn't mean it's the problem. Okay. All right. So anyhow, I think you need to find a doctor that understands functional medicine and all these complex problems, and then try to work through the history to find out where you should start doing your testing and where you should put your efforts. Okay. All right. If you can't find somebody, I'd be glad to do that in one of my limited consult service visits I just described earlier, because I could take that history and try to give you better sense on that. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question. Hello, Stuart. Let's see. Q4, I think question for Dr. Ross. Got it. Have you had any patients been totally cured after, say, 3 to 6 months after being bitten with just antibiotics, say, for Babesia and co-infections? Yes. Often it's better if you can treat those people right away. They have the best chance of recovering. I have had one patient that had Lyme and co-infections for about 5 years before they saw me. And usually those are 2-3 years of treatment before you get somebody well. And after 4 months of treating with me, he was completely well. And he was sick when he first came to see me. So it is very possible to get over this quickly in some people. Okay? All right. Very good. Thank you for the question. Hello, Marta. Let's see. Greetings from Australia. I have a question about myelin sheaths. Would you recommend anything for repairing myelin sheaths damage in trigeminal nerves due to Lyme and Bartonella? Kind regards, Marta. Yes, if you've treated Lyme and you've treated Bartonella and you've treated them for a while, say 6 to 9 months. I love that 6 to 9 month time frame. Okay, but if you've treated and you are still having significant nerve damage symptoms, and it's nerves up near the head and in the brain and the cranial nerves that come out, which is one of the, and the trigeminal nerves, all that. One of the things that can sometimes help is to do phospholipid injections. So phospholipids are the kind of fats that make up the myelin, okay? There is a product called N-Essential, I believe that comes out of Germany, that some practitioners will infuse. I'm not sure who's doing it in Australia. If you can't find somebody to do that, then using a type of phospholipid fat, or fatty acid, I should say, called phosphatidylcholine. Sometimes you can find integrated medicine doctors that will do IV infusions of phosphatidylcholine. That might also repair the injury to that myelin sheath as well, too. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question. Hello, Christopher. Hi, Dr. Ross. 4 years ago, sat in a sauna next to a migrant workers. Next day, woke up with a body louse attached to my chest. Since I've manifested symptoms of Bartonella, can't be sure it's not Lyme or something else. Shortly after being bitten on my chest, a small mark appeared on the back of my head, which has grown in size to 2 inches by 3 inches. Have you ever heard a patient with this? Your thoughts? I'm thinking of coming to see you. Well, I'd be glad to help you. Okay. One of the things I would look at is possibly Bartonella with this. I don't know. I haven't seen that lice can transmit Lyme, but there are various vectors, and I believe I'd have to look at this in more detail. But I think that Bartonella can be transmitted by the lice, I believe. Anyhow, I would consider testing for it, and I would probably do one of those Galaxy Lab tests that I explained earlier tonight. Okay, all right. So I'd be glad to help you. Again, take a look at my website. The ability to schedule an in-person visit will go live as soon as I have a signed agreement with my new landlord. Just wish he would get this thing to me because I want to launch and let everyone know I'm open for business again. But I'm not going to do it until I have a signed lease, and I'm hoping that's going to happen sometime late this week or early next week. All right? All right. Thanks, Christopher. Hello, Joyce. Hi, Dr. Ross. Listening to you speak about disulfiram to help break up biofilm. Have you heard of using essential oils to break up biofilm? I heard that combining rosemary, clove bud, and oregano essential oils to accomplish this more naturally. Are you familiar with this? So, yes, essential oils can break up biofilms. There is some laboratory evidence of it. If we look at how strong it is, at least experience would suggest that disulfiram is much stronger. The type of Herx reactions that people get when they were starting to use disulfiram, not at low doses, but just jumping in, is just monstrous compared to anything I've seen by using essential oils to break down biofilms. Okay, so I think disulfiram is like in its own world. It's in its own cosmos practically, and when it comes to breaking down biofilms compared to the potency that you're going to find out of the essential oils. Okay, all right. So there's where you can see some of the evidence on this. There's a researcher out of Johns Hopkins University, a medical doctor named Ying Zhang, who's been trying to do a bunch of research looking at ways to treat persister Lyme and also treat, I think some of his newest stuff is on how to treat Bartonella, persister Bartonella too. And some of his work has involved using essential oils. And if we look at some of his experiments, it suggests good breakdown of biofilms. Okay? All right. Good luck, Joyce. Hello, Justin. Let's see. I've been treating Lyme Bartonella for 10 years and have made strides the first 2 years, but only improved to 70% health. Do I continue to keep trying different antibiotics until I notice Herx or improvement at this point? How critical is detox immune boosting? Does treating the symptoms help improve the root cause of the infection? All right. So the question I would have for you, Justin, and the only way I would really know is I would need to ask you a bunch of questions to figure this out. But after being on antibiotics for 2 years, the possibility may be that what you're left with is more injury from having had the infections, and it may be time to step in and do what I call repair work. So for instance, one thing that can become injured from chronic infection is when you have chronic infection, your immune system overproduces oxidizing agents like hydrogen peroxide, for instance. And those oxidizing agents can damage the covering of your cell energy factories called mitochondria. And so sometimes the reason you keep having fatigue and your immune system doesn't work right is that it's not getting enough energy out of the cell energy factories. there are steps you can take to repair those mitochondria. We're going to be a little short on time here because it's already time for me to end the webinar. I'll show you the article. But one thing I would suggest doing is looking at mitochondria repair. I might even have some other ideas for it, like you might need to repair your gut after being on antibiotics all these years so it works better and you get better functioning your immune system because the bacteria in the gut tell your immune system to work better, okay? So two things I could think of already that I might want to explore with you would be repair of the gut bacteria, also known as a microbiome. And the second thing would be repair of your mitochondria, okay? Well, let me show you the article on that one real quick. Okay. Oh, yeah. So earlier I tried showing everyone my new practice website. Here it is, martyrossmd.com. Again, go to the appointments page and you will see where I explain the two types of services that I offer here. You can even set the appointment up here by clicking on one of these buttons. The full medical service one does not work right now because I don't have a signed lease yet for my new space that I hope to open December 2nd. Okay. All right. All right, then in terms of mitochondria repair, take a look here under this section called Energy and Fatigue, and then click on this article here. There's about 4 different things you may need to take to repair your mitochondria, and I describe them all in this article, okay? All right, whew. That was a lot tonight, and I actually maintained a boisterous energy throughout it. So now I'm going to go ahead and probably be very pooped the rest of the evening. But I really enjoy being here with you all. I get a charge out of doing these, and I'm glad to really keep helping everyone as well, too. So tomorrow morning, take a look at your email somewhere around 8:30 to 9 in the morning. You'll get an email from me, 8:30 to 9 Pacific Standard Time, Seattle time, okay? You'll get an email from me saying that the recording is ready. Also in that email will be a link that you can click to sign up for next week's webinar. We have 2 more webinars this month. We've got next week and the week after, and then I'm going to take off for Thanksgiving. So yeah, glad to see everyone here tonight, and keep healing. All right. Good night, everyone.